All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. We are thrilled to have you all here with us for session 5 of our PD session. We started this in January and we've come to y'all talking about all sorts of things from cohorts to CCR and grad rate and participation rate. And now here we are to the point of talking about our corrections window and putting in place something that is clear and consistent across the state. So we're going to bring you an overview today of the corrections window process. This essentially will be a new process because we have not had a very consistent, clear, pre-communicated process in the past. And so this will be a little bit new, but the components of it overall will not be alarmingly new, I don't believe. So we're going to walk you through the overview today, and then in June, and I've got those dates coming for you, and I know they were in the email. We will take you through the processes. So today we're not going to get into templates and specific fill this in here, copy paste this here. We're going to talk you through the windows, the processes, those kind of pieces, and then next month we'll come back with very specific details. So you are here because you are on the DIMS list for accountability coordinators, district testing coordinators, assessment proxies, and power school administrators, or potentially you received this email forwarded to you from someone who has one of those roles in DIMS. And so we do gear this professional development towards our district level leaders. So for my folks who might be school level leaders who got this forwarded to you, please direct your questions after this back to your district person first and then allow them to communicate that with us. We know that each district may have processes that they're going to do a little bit differently. And so we want to make sure that you go through your district person and your district process first versus reaching out directly to Van, myself, or Wendy. But for my district folks, of course, y'all know how to get us, and all of our contact information will be included on the last slide and as also included on those emails that you get from the school report cards email. So let's jump right into it. A couple little housekeeping things. As you know, the microphone and the video is disabled. We have been having around 200 people participating in each of these. So that would be a lot of videos and microphones. We are also recording this session with the goal of being able to share and post that recording back out to you. So pending all things going the way we would plan and hope, we will get those videos out to you as soon as we can turn it back around. But the slides will be coming out either this afternoon or tomorrow. I'll get those slide details out to you as well. Okay, there is no chat, but there is a Q&A feature. So you can actually check into the Q&A and you can see some of the questions that were asked and answered yesterday, and you can put new questions in there if you have them. But please do use the Q&A as like a single use question at a time. So each question you have, post it as its own individual question, not embedded into another person's previously asked question. That just helps us with our flow to make sure that we answer you. Sometimes if you post a question embedded under an answer to somebody else's question, we just lose that question because we think we've already answered the question, and then we just miss it. So to best get you answered, please post your question like a single use, one question at a time. We will get to those questions. We've got our team here working to answer them as we go through, but we will also have that, if you've been to our prior sessions, that planning time towards the end where we will get into more questions, and we try to hang back and answer everything before we get off as well. So use the Q&A for your questions. Use them in that single use, not embedding questions inside of other questions. So thank you for all of that, and let's get going. To start us out with our agenda, here's what we're going to be talking about. Why are we having corrections? What's the deal with that? We'll talk a little bit about our goals there for having high quality data. When will the corrections occur? How or what will be corrected? There are specific things in each of the windows. How are they going to be submitted? We have a process. What will happen after they're submitted? So what are we going to do on the SCDE side? Communicate that with you. And then how will you know if your corrections are approved? We'll give you some of that planning time so you can start thinking about how you're going to work through the window and who all you need to be a part of your district team to make those things happen. So you can just start thinking through planning and next steps. So we said we'd start out with why corrections. And if you've been to any of our prior PDs or presentations we've done at SCAS or with other groups, we always like to share what our mission is here for accountability and state report cards. And of course, that is to redesign and sustain South Carolina's accountability system, particularly as reflected by the school report card, so that it clearly defines excellence, measures what matters, and provides families, educators, and policymakers with actionable, easy to understand information that drives improvement for our students. And that is the mission. That is like the big overarching what we're driving to. And you want to just pop over to the next thing to say, we have some goals that we are working towards to make that mission a reality. And our first goal centers around accountability and that piece about what is excellence. So how do we measure it or measure what matters? And that's a piece of work that we're doing with the kind of forward future looking, right? That longitudinal, longer term goals as we can work into policy planning and then leading into goal 2 for reportings and analytics. So how can we communicate those things in a timely way that when people go to look at the report card, it makes sense and it's useful and it's intuitive. And again, those are things that we're working on, some small tweaks for this year, but they are bigger, more long-term goals. But goal 3, data collection and quality, is something that we believe we can get deeper into right now, making sure that we're providing the systems, the processes, and the tools to support your work, that we're checking in that data flow and having all the information that needs to come in, be ingested, and produce a report card, having the calculations populating to dashboards so you're able to check things, and of course, improving the understanding of requirements. And that piece is where we've been digging in here with the data quality, so that you are able to see what's going into that report card, to submit corrections if needed. And of course, all of those things are based on the expectations posted in the accountability manual, and then the calculations that are a part of that accountability manual that then produce the rating. So everything, all that we presented to you in our PDs have come directly from the accountability manual or the PowerSchool or EA dashboard, whatever it may be that's surfacing, ingesting and surfacing those pieces to you. So that's why corrections, because we know that every single one of these pieces may not always work properly. And then also we know that you have a variety of folks on your team and at all your schools, and that sometimes all the things that you expected to happen don't always work perfectly and properly either. So there's a lot of inputs to one great output that we want to have the highest quality possible. So if we can provide to you some information about what's going into that report card, give you an opportunity to verify that, check it back, send it back, then we can get those things updated and have a report card that is the highest quality and best represents what that data is supposed to be. So that's why. Now we're going to share with you a little bit more about the window and what's going to go into each of those things. And I've got Wendy here with us to give a little bit more detail there.
Hey, everybody, let's talk about this corrections window. And prior to jumping into it, we do have a little bit of a note on professional development and preparation. For what you see here, this first one, of course, you are here today, so you got the memo on this, but yesterday and today, so May 20th and May 21st, we're providing to you here this overview of summer 2026 process for your corrections window. And just for your calendars, note that June 17th and June 18th, we're going to have another professional development session for you. That is going to be for the data corrections window, the specific forms, templates, and procedures in a bit more detail. So today what you're getting it's very much an overview so that you know what to expect. You can put things on the calendar for that. You can have a sense of how to plan. And we'll even give you that planning time as we usually do, but we're going to go into a bit more depth with specifics on those days. All right, so please be aware that this process will begin, this corrections window is going to begin after July 1st. And this is one of the reasons that it's essential that districts have a plan to ensure continuity of accountability work through the summer and October release of the report cards. So planning should really be on our minds right now at this stage. All right. One thing that we like to just keep reminding everyone is it would be really good to think about it like this. We are currently in the primary correction window. I'm going to give you some key dates here in a second. The first one is going to be focused on this upcoming due date that we have for PowerSchool data coming to Ed5, and then we'll give you the assessment date deadline and then the summer date. And so yes, we have like a very well planned out corrections window for you, but we know that you would probably rather go ahead and have everything wrapped up and done, and that would be best. And so as you're analyzing, as you're going through and looking through everything, today, one of the tools that may come in handy to you is something that my team has sent out to PowerSchool administrators. If we know that different districts operate differently, have different workflows, and so if you're working with your PowerSchool administrator, if you're here today and you're a PowerSchool administrator, well, you do a lot. There's a lot going on there in PowerSchool right now. And so we have a checklist and we call it really a hub, I guess, rather than a checklist. But it sort of serves in some ways as a checklist of things to look through and think about as you button up the year so that you can say, yep, I'm done. You can do your final data publish. And there are all these little things that PowerSchool administrators know they need to do, like turn off this thing we call a profile and whatnot, and just kind of button up the year. And we even have a high touch effort right now to really touch base with everybody and just say, hey, how are you feeling? Because this year with accountability, we don't want there to be any delay with the corrections windows. We want the dates to stay as they are. We want that to be consistent for you. That's predictable for you. And so we're really trying to make sure everybody feels great about buttoning things up by that deadline. So we'll give you those dates in a second. And of course, use Administrator Navigator. That's one of the things we found that in those partnerships, in those data teams, if you will, in the districts, folks who are maybe in that accountability role might have more of an eye on Administrator Navigator. And then, in their conversations with maybe their PowerSchool coordinator, sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not, but they are able to kind of share that information. Hey, I'm seeing something that is not expected, right? Is it possible that it has something to do with publishing? Can we check that? Or, if that's not it, then look into it in other ways and just make sure you're happy with your data. All right, so another reminder about that, use Administrator Navigator to view and verify your 9GR cohorts. We'll have some screenshots, I think, coming up later in the presentation to remind you of what that can look like within the tool. So that's similar to the prior use of base files, right? So that's a bit more of a, just an updated way of doing that we have. In the past, it was base files. Administrator Navigator can also be used to verify test score data for CCR. And SCDE is going to shift from Administrator Navigator to static student level report card files this summer. So we intend for this to be the final year of static student level files. All of our decisions around this are just, very intentional, trying to kind of transition as we move forward in modernizing the way that we do things. But that is something we wanted to make sure that you're aware of here. All right, so those dates that I mentioned, let's take a look. So take a minute to look at this. Really, what I'd like to say is I think for you all, that middle section is really the key for you. We will go ahead and put the SCDE collect side because that's really kind of saying over to the right, hey, that's when we're looking at it and using it. And so sometimes, if we refer to that date, that's what's happening there. But we also wanted to really, really clarify from the perspective, the sort of technical perspective of getting the data submitted. Sometimes it's helpful to say, okay, let's spell this out. What that means is that your submissions need to be complete. Your publishing, to use that Ed5 publishing terminology, that needs to be complete and successful by this date and by this time. And that way you can plan and work backwards from that, from your end. So we divided this into 3 critical windows. The first is the PowerSchool data collection that everyone's really focused on getting wrapped up. And the submissions for that are due by June 14th at 7 p.m. But guys, that's a Sunday. So we have been really encouraging, my team has been really encouraging districts to not wait until then because, with technology, sometimes, you may end up needing support with something. Hopefully it'll all go smoothly, but we do not recommend waiting until, a few hours before that very final deadline to publish things. That's just not the most prudent way to approach that. And so we're we're saying to everybody, hey, you don't want to be working on the weekend, like go ahead and try to pick a date some time before that. We're recommending, that your deadline for yourself be something like June 10th, 11th, maybe 12th at the latest, because again, then you're really bumping up against the weekend. And we're actually doing some outreach to say to everybody, hey, can we thought partner with you? When is your final date that you're anticipating? And that way we can also track that on our end as you're closing things up and help monitor on our side. EA is helping monitor on their side, PowerSchool's monitoring on theirs. So that way we can partner together. So if, when you get that outreach from a teammate, that's us just really trying to support you as you're planning and wrapping things up for the year. So, but in any case, the hard deadline is the data has to be submitted successfully by June 14th at 7 p.m. Again, pick an earlier date. Assessment data collection, that submission, because we know there's a reason for this. There's some assessment data that might have to be entered just because of when it becomes available from the vendor after that PowerSchool deadline, right? And those data are either being entered via Runway, or in some cases, if it's a bulk load from an SCDE and EA load, then it's sometimes submitted that way. But in any case, that data has to be submitted by July 31st at 7 p.m. So then it's available on the state side by August 1st. And then the last corrections window, or sorry, this is not the corrections window yet. This is the deadlines window, right? That will make the corrections window dates make more sense, right? So we have to look at these deadlines first. The summer graduation data collection is going to close August 16th at 7 p.m. So that's for summer graduation data. And for my folks who speak the language of PowerSchool and EdFi and all of the data submissions in that way, the thing to keep in mind there is that what you're doing is you're actually submitting that data after you've hooked up to like next year's environment, right? Next year's EdFi API and ODS. So that will be, you'll have already buttoned up everything for this year on the PowerSchool side, but well before that, July 14th at 7 p.m. And then when you are publishing your final summer graduation data, which is going to be PowerSchool data, you're going to be doing that to the next year environment by August 16th at 7 p.m. You will have these slides, and you're going to see that there's a link in here to something that we've already sent out to our PowerSchool folks, but anyone's welcome to use it. Again, we know people partner internally in different ways, and so there's no reason you can't work with this document as a team, but we have this sort of EdFi data submission guide, this hub that the team has put together. Right now, it really focuses on that first row, which is the PowerSchool data submission, but we can also add pieces, and we'll add pieces for the assessment data and the summer graduation as we move forward, because we know that once you close the book on that first row there, you're going to be thinking about those other pieces too. All right. So now let's talk about the actual corrections windows. And we wanted to give you the context on those other deadlines and make sure everyone was aware of those so you could have those on your calendar, right? So make sure you have these on your calendar and you're thinking about them. They will make the corrections window dates make a little bit more sense. And also, again, our team's effort to really reach out. Part of that is if you kind of think, wow, okay, we've got these very specific windows set. If we want to maintain that, then we want to help make sure everybody feels good about being on time. And this is, a little different. We think this is really a good thing for everyone, that we've got this three-part window set up, but it does require a little bit of planning and just awareness around the dates. So let's take a look at it. So the first part of this window, or the first window, is the denominator window, is what we're calling it. So the purpose of this is to verify student inclusion eligibility. Verify student inclusion eligibility for the cohort. So for this, your submission, the district submission window is going to be July 13th through 17th, and SCDE is going to review that using a process that we have in place internally with our team. It's not just a one-person effort. We've got a team doing this. We're going to be reviewing that July 20th through 31st. And an updated file is going to be provided to you in ADT the week of August 3rd. So we'll get into some of the details here in a minute about how that's going to work, but those are the dates. The numerator window, the purpose there is to verify student outcomes and results. And that window is going to be a little bit later. So I want to pause here and clarify a thing. Some of you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, don't we still have, data for assessments that is still being submitted through July 31st based on that last chart we looked at? Yes, we do. And that data is going to be needed for that numerator correction window, but not for the denominator one. So what we're trying to do is kind of go ahead and layer this in so that you have that opportunity while we're going, you're able to go ahead and do corrections for things related to the denominator, and verifying that student inclusion eligibility. And then for the numerator, once all that assessment data is in, and that will be then making it possible for you to go ahead and do your corrections, verifying student outcomes and results. All right, so SCDE reviews that one September 8th through 21st, and the updated file is provided in ADT the week of September 21st. And then finally, we have this third window, which I say is kind of just like checking the math at the end, right? So basically the first two, when we get into the process of exactly how that's going to look, and exactly what you'll be doing there is going to be a piece where you're correcting data in the source system. This third one, you're not. It's requesting corrections. When you look at the embargo site and you say, okay, let me look at the preliminary ratings that are posted, and do those look right to me? And if you're requesting any corrections for that, that will be part of there'll be a process for that that we're going to tell you about, but it's not going to require correction at the source at that point. That correction at the source is the first two windows. So that window is September 28th through 30th. It's final validation. That's the last piece. And then you're going to see that there's an update to the embargo site October 1st. All right, and again, a reminder, each window is distinct and serves a specific role in ensuring accurate accountability reporting. All right, I'm going to hand it back over to Era to talk about what is part of each of these.
All right, and I know Wendy gave you a pretty good overview of what is in each of the windows, but you're going to get it again here a little bit in more detail. So when we talk about that first window, that denominator window, we are talking about the students that are eligible to be in the metric based on the predefined criteria from the accountability manual for that metric. So, like elementary and middle academic achievement, you're looking at continuous enrollment through first day of testing. If we're looking at a cohort, we're looking at non-GR, and that the denominator is saying, yes, y'all have there's some other nuances in all of those things. And we've done PDs on each of those parts, right? About participation rate for academic achievement and preparing for success. We've done PD on cohorts. So those pieces, your grad rate cohort essentially is your CCR cohort. So we've done the PD on those. If you want to go back to the predefined criteria, you can go back to those PD sessions, accountability manual, whatever it may be. But essentially, we're going to be taking that student record, taking that eligibility rules, just who is included, not included, and that's what's going to be on that student level type of file that you're going to get. You will not see any values earned. So this is not going to be reporting yes or no a diploma was earned, yes or no that they met a CCR requirement. It is just, are you included or not included? No test scores, no credits, no diploma outcomes. Of course, there would not be enough information there to determine a rating or any points like that, just included and excluded. So that's what you're going to be looking at in that very first window. List of students, file across the top, included in achieved denominator, yes, no, included in, first year on track denominator, yes, no, very just clear, include, exclude. That's your first window. Then your next window is the numerator window. And that one is, of course, later once we've been able to get scores in or the student outcomes in. So this is where we're going to take those student outcomes, apply the values that are predefined in the criteria. How many points does MEETS get? How many points does an A get? Do they have the credits that they need to meet on track? Do they have the value or outcome that they need to be CCR? Each of those pieces that kind of layers in there with the values. At that point is when exclusions are applied. I know you would kind of think that exclusions would have been in the denominator, but if you reflect back on that participation rate in students not tested PD, scores are a part of determining if a student qualifies for that exclusion or not. So if someone had potentially submitted a student's not tested exclusion for, a reason, but then we also had a score for that student, that exclusion does not apply. The score stands. So we can't give you exclusion applications until we've basically run through the values applied in the score. So when you're thinking denominator, first window, just are they eligible to be on this list? Yes or no? Second window, later window, outcomes are applied, values are applied, exclusions are applied. We aren't going to give you a metric at that point, but you'll essentially have all of the details that you need, a lot of them, to start working towards some metrics if you wanted to on your end. The metric window is coming soon after. So once we've got that numerator value locked in, building off those cohort corrections, so we're building off of everything that you've already told us in the first window, remove this student, add this student, remove this student, whatever it might be. We're building off of that denominator correction to now build you the numerator file from the students that are to be included, applying the exclusions, and then finally we'll get into ratings. But I did just make this little chart here for quick reference so that whenever we get to the point of you looking at denominator and looking at numerator, that it could help you think about what is being checked in each one. Because I know it could be easy to look at it and say, oh, I know I submitted an exclusion for this, or I know this student would qualify for maybe an ML exclusion because they're recently arrived or something like that. Exclusions aren't coming in until the numerator window. So if we just have a little piece there, or when you get your denominator file and you think there's no scores in here, it's coming later. That's coming with the numerator file. So just gave you a little chart to lay those out. It could be helpful if you're working with additional folks when y'all are looking at what we're looking at in each of these windows here. So then you go into getting your third window, which is your preliminary ratings review. At this point, the denominator, the eligibility or who's in, who's out has been set, the values have been set, and now we are running calculations for those metrics, that metric calculation review. This window is a shorter window because at this point, there is not student level data files to be combing through and finding errors. At this point, you're looking for just, did this calculation turn out the way that based on the accountability manual that I would expect it to turn out? Essentially, are the numbers lining up to the way that they should? To the most part, that's not something that we historically have had big issues with calculations not being accurate, but it could happen. And there have been small instances here or there where things have come up or little bugs in code or something. So we also want to give you the opportunity to review that piece and go ahead and flag if something did come out, incorrectly in the metrics calculation review, so that we can try to debug that and get those metrics accurate by the time that we get to reporting. So the emphasis in that last window is just possible errors in the calculation. And then I put it all together in a little flow chart here so you can see how each piece connects from the student record to the eligibility rules. Are they going to be on that file? Now we're layering and adding their outcomes, the values from the manual, the exclusions that are coming out to put us in a place to be able to calculate a metric and then give you the opportunity to review those metrics. So it's very systematic here, each piece of the puzzle, one chunk at a time, that will ideally, hopefully, and all hands on deck, get us to a great place come October with the outcomes that you would be expecting to see in your embargo portal. So we'll now walk you through the process. We're not going into templates. We will give you some little screenshot samples of some stuff of what they could look like, but just know it's not going to get that deep, but we are going to go ahead and give you a flyover so that as you're starting to think through how this is going to work for your district and what are the pieces and parts, you can have an idea of who you might need on that team and what you might be looking to assemble for working on your corrections window. All right, back over to Wendy, our data management expert.
And okay. Let's see. All right. So let's talk about data corrections process. Sure, it lets me. There we go. Okay, so we have a nice little chart for you all to walk you through the process of how to get these data corrections effectively done. So the district is going to receive a file in ADT, and for many of you, maybe not all of you, depending on how long you've been in your role or you've been in the particular role of thinking about these pieces of the accountability work. But for many of you, you may be accustomed to seeing a pretty large Excel file with accountability report card metrics that is sent to you there in the past. It was sent by Sylvia Sivers. It's going to be sent by Aaron Brown this year. And that file goes to ADT, and it has quite a few tabs in it and quite a few metrics. This year, for the corrections window, what you're going to get is for the first piece of that window, you're going to get a few columns of that file that have to do with the denominator data. And some of those are going to be columns that are clearly marked such that you can, or clearly labeled, I should say, such that you will know these are ones that can be corrected. And then there will be a few others that are there for context, so you kind of know what that record is about, right? What student record is it? What school, some specifics about what it's about. So you're going to get that. So for each piece of the process, I should say, for the denominator and the numerator corrections windows, you're going to get a file that has the relevant tabs and the relevant columns in it. For that third part of the corrections window, it'll be a little bit different because you're looking at the embargo website, right? But the process will be similar in some other ways. You get the file. Districts are going to review the student records in the file. Okay, so take a look at those, and you're going to complete a corrections template, and we'll have really specific instructions for you. Remember, today is kind of an overview, and we have that other PD coming up, right? We'll really dig into the specifics, but you're going to have a template that basically explains how to indicate exactly which rows, which corrections, and you're going to fill that out. And there's even going to be a little place in it where it says, there's a little drop down that says why, what's sort of the reasoning for why this needs correcting. The district is going to verify, any supporting documentation. That box is just sort of a reminder. We know that, if you're requesting the correction, you probably certainly do have that documentation somewhere, but we wanted to put that in the flow chart as a reminder to you, hey, even though we're not asking for all of that to be submitted, make sure that you have it, right? If there were ever some sort of audit or something, like, you want to make sure you had that. And then the district is going to complete something called a corrections plan. And the details on that will be forthcoming. But basically, there's going to be an explanation about why these corrections and, what would be different in the future. But all those details will come in terms of what goes into that plan. And the district's going to upload the corrections template and the plan to ADT. So it's those two pieces, the template that has, hey, here's exactly the records and what needs to be corrected, and here's the plan with all the things that are a part of that. And so there's some narrative pieces to the plan, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And you'll get the specifics on those narrative pieces. For the next part, the district's going to submit what we call a SolarWinds ticket. It occurred to me, I probably should have called this e-services or e-support ticket. We think of it as SolarWinds, but it's e-support. And your web access coordinators have access to that. So you would want to make sure that somebody has access to the ticketing system. We'll put out some instructions on that really soon to make sure that you have at least one person who can access that and put in a ticket on behalf of your district for this. And that ticket is going to be the primary method that we use to track the work being done for your corrections request and the communication between the district and between SCDE. We really ask that you not, it's not that we mind if you email us, that's fine, but we don't want folks to assume that emails are going to be a good way to have that communication done, because when an email is sent, oftentimes maybe only one or two people are on it, and we actually have a whole team of people working on this with a very specific process in place. So we need that ticketing system to be able to serve you better and to manage this effectively. So we ask that you rely on that for this specific thing. And SCD is going to review the request that comes in through the ticket. Once the ticket comes in, the files will be accessed from ADT on the SCDE side, and they're going to be reviewed by a committee review. The updated files, once it's been processed, let's say it comes through, everything was followed to the T. In best case scenario, right, it's an easy file to process because the directions were followed and all that good stuff, and it gets processed, and your updated file by the deadline that we gave you on the previous slide will be distributed to ADT. So one of the things that I would highlight here that we'll kind of talk more about in detail later is any little instructions that you have that may seem, may seem small, like, oh, like if we say, here's a naming convention for how to rename the file. And, for example, it might say, add these 2 letters to the beginning of it, or whatever the convention ends up being in those instructions. You would want to make sure you followed that, because all of that makes it possible to accurately process your file and your corrections. All right, so just a little sneak peek. The names of these columns, we're still thinking through renaming to make it really, really clear for you, but these are some examples of how you might see some renaming. So for example, we're not gonna have things color-coded, but just for the purposes of this presentation, you see two that are color-coded that would be columns that could be corrected. And we might say something like, hey, this is reviewable, this is correctable. We flag that for you in the name of it and in the instructions. And then you have a few other columns that are there on that particular tab that's in your file that are there to give you information about the record. Okay, so there's what you can correct, and then there's, hey, here's some information so you kind of know what record you're requesting corrections for. And we know that too. So again, this is a familiar header with some name changes for clarity is what we're looking at. And you're going to include, we'll maintain that consistent column header across districts. So we would ask that people not kind of go into that file and say, well, let me rename this. We know sometimes when we do work in data, sometimes people might create, sort of their own worksheet or something like that. Please don't submit your worksheet to us. We need it to really be followed. We need the instructions to be followed, and that is to serve you better so that your file can be processed. We don't have to send it back and say, hey, we can't really process this efficiently or at all because the meaning of things has changed somehow and how the file has been manipulated. So we ask that folks just not change the header. It's going to be distributed through ADT, and again, we're going to include specific review and verification indicators. All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Era soon, but before I do that, let me actually talk with you a little bit about the district submissions. An e-support, e-services, or SolarWinds ticket, all of those, if you hear us use those terms, that's our ticketing system for this. That ticketing system alerts SCDE to corrections submission and provides a clear communication channel for SCDE review and district progress update. Again, just a reminder about what we just talked about here. The 2 main deliverables are that accurately completed and renamed corrections template and the naming convention and all the details of how to make sure that that's correct. Those will be provided. A corrections plan is the other deliverable that you're going to put in ADT. And so the ticket is just saying, hey, I've submitted mine. We'll make it crystal clear how to submit that ticket, which drop down to select. So it goes right to through the correct channel. And then we'll be able to go to ADT and find those 2 deliverables to review. ADT, again, is the collection source for deliverables due to PII. So probably, we do have a really secure system for our ticketing system, but just to be extra safe, we really want to make sure that we're using that ADT secure file share for this year. And so that's what we're asking folks to do. Just use the ticket for the communication, and then ADT is going to be where the files are going because that'll help with consistency and PII. Districts are to ensure proper documentation for the requested correction exists, but this will not be submitted unless specifically requested. So we had that in our flow chart. The next bullet here says professional development sessions, key resources, and accountability. And the accountability manual may all be used to support a deeper understanding of inclusion and metric denominator, which is window 1, and numerator, window 2, and ratings calculations, window 3. So feel free to continue using the resources you have at your disposal to with your review and your review team. And an important note is that detailed technical guidance and file specifications will be reviewed during June procedure sessions. So if you're wondering about specifics, like, oh, exactly what are the column header names going to be in that thing that you get, those are things that we will review. So this is just that high level what to expect, so you can kind of plan and pull your team together and put things on your calendar. All right, so the SolarWinds ticket begins, or the e-services, e-support ticket begins the process with SCDE for the corrections request. Again, that's that primary communications channel for your request. Corrections review team at SCDE will be reviewing district submissions. Tickets will be resolved in the ticketing system with feedback to the district, and approved submissions will be processed for coding updates. Updated files produced to ADT as listed in the key dates table are going to be sent there. So in one of our tables, there was some dates for you, and one of those included, hey, this is when we plan to then make the file available once the corrections have been applied. Eight. Oops, sorry, one last slide here. Process responsibility. Superintendents are going to receive a form to indicate who the designee for correction is following the May 21st professional development session. So be on the lookout for that. In addition to the normal invite list, the designee will be invited to the June sessions. So when you're thinking today, when we get to that part where we pause and we say, hey, do some planning, these are things you might want to just make note of in that planning. That again, your superintendents are going to receive a form to indicate who the designee for correction is following the session that we're having here today. Districts with accountability related position changes occurring over the summer should plan for knowledge transfer now. So again, part of that planning, we know, I think Era has already mentioned, like we acknowledge, yeah, you might have some shift happening this time of year in terms of roles and contracts and things like that. So that's something to think about and plan for, that you have somebody available and in place who would be able to do this if your district takes advantage of the opportunity and if there's a need, right? You might not have corrections, but if you do, who would be the point person for that you could designate. The person indicated as a designee should be actively working for the district during the duration of the corrections window. Yes, it's over the summer and, but, and people might be doing different things, but that's when this has to occur. So we just really want everyone to think about that and plan for that. The designee also is the district's primary point of contact for corrections. So please ensure that they're able to engage through that support eServices SolarWinds ticket. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Era for some housekeeping.
This is going to be about summer graduates. So do you want to?
Oh gosh, sorry. I took Era's slide. Era, do you have anything else for us that I didn't explain well? I think I took a couple of your slides. Okay.
She's good. I think the main piece on that superintendent's form is my goal will be to get it out today. I do have to get another set of eyes on it, but if not, it will go out to the superintendents listed on the DIMS list tomorrow. We will give them those details about who their primary designee is. Of course, have as much of a team as you need, but we need one main point of contact that is essentially submitting and putting through the corrections through the SolarWinds ticket. And that can be whoever your team superintendent decide for it to be, as long as they're going to be actively there to do the things that need to be done during the corrections window. It doesn't have to necessarily be the accountability person or the Power School person, but it should be somebody that would be actively working for your district that would be able to attest to those corrections and send them through. So I think that was my main pieces. And we are going to ask those superintendents to have that back by June 3rd, but I'll be checking in and checking on progress and just hoping to get everybody in there and listed so we can add that person to our invite list for the June session and continue with communication with them as well following that. All right, Ms. Wendy, back on into Summer Grads and On Track dashboard.
Summer Grads and On Track, let's go. All right. Very good. So some housekeeping here. Summer graduates, NIGR 23. Diplomas earned by summer graduates are to be coded in Power School by the third Monday in August. That was a question we got, I think, early in one of our other sessions. And so I know some of you may have also been wondering it. Usually if we have one question, we have many people wondering that question. And so keep that in mind, all right? The third Monday in August. Districts are then going to load to Power School by, and I should say they need to have the data submitted in Power School and submitted also to their EdFi system by August 16th. And again, that was in that little chart that we gave you for your data publishing deadline. For my technical folks in here who are wondering, okay, are we submitting to this year's environment or next year's? Remember, as I mentioned earlier, you're already hooked up to next year's environment. That's okay. We know that. So that's where you're sending that. All right. And yes, so that arrives to SCDE. We'll have it the next day. Remember that this note here is only for summer graduates. So as we've mentioned, all other graduates must be coded by the June 14th deadline. And again, I just love to keep reiterating that is a Sunday. Please do it several days before. So all your other graduates, like, now's the time for that. And you're going to follow the same guidance for coding graduates provided in the graduation rate and high school student success indicator. All right, on track and CCR dashboard. Combining some key ideas from our PD series, a few notes for you. Please use Administrator Navigator to view and verify 9GR cohorts. We've got some good dashboards in there for you, so take a look at what's there. There may be some things that, if you haven't leveraged that to this point, that you might really find that's very handy for you. So do that. It's similar to the process that we've had in prior years of using base files. So take a look there at Administrator Navigator. Administrator Navigator should also be used to view and verify test score data for CCR. And several of these assessments are to be loaded by the district. And we have a web page that breaks down sort of whether the district is loading via Runway or whether it's a bulk load at the state level. And then finally, remember that SCDE will shift from Administrator Navigator to static student level report card files for this summer. So we intend for this to be the final year static student level files. As I mentioned, for the corrections period, we are, it's a process by which you're receiving a file and you're submitting that way. So just making note of that. Again, we intend for this to be the final year doing the student level files. All right, and I'm going to toss it back over to Era to talk with you a little bit. And we've got a nice screenshot here of one of the dashboards.
Okie dokie. So a lot of you all who got the same email to attend this also got an email talking about the new cohort verification dashboard tool that EA released. They had office hours to go over this tool on May 11th and May 18th. And if you did not get to see that or you weren't available, it is recorded in their Google Drive folder that I've also linked here in the slides. So when you get the slides, you will be able to kind of go in and see that. Or if you've got those EA newsletters, you can get to that Google Drive folder there as well. If you're not getting EA newsletters or EA office hours information, I also put the registration link there so that you can have their most up-to-date information and knowledge around the dashboards and the visibility that they have been able to surface and put out. So essentially, rules aren't changing, manuals aren't changing, but your visibility into the way things are being pulled should be increasing, and you should be able to see more in a live view than potentially you've been able to see in the past. Or maybe these are all things that you were already putting in a lot of time and effort pulling out of PowerSchool and getting them out to your schools. So as Wendy mentioned, the cohort verification dashboard is a really nice tool to be able to look at and see just a lot of those things that y'all have been asking for about who's in, who's out, why are they out, who's transferred to another district, who maybe surfacing those blank 9GRs and looking at them and saying, is that supposed to be blank, or do I need to follow back up with somebody and have that fixed and corrected so that we know that our data is correct for what is landing. So I just wanted to highlight that dashboard is there. It is under the data verification tab when you go into your EA portal in Admin Navigator to take a look. And while we're here and talking about cohorts, I knew yesterday we got a question about the cohort field for elementary and middle, and today we got the question, and so I thought let me clarify there because we've used the term denominator so often talking about cohorts because as you know, in PowerSchool there's a specific line that says, like include in denominator, include in numerator, include in denominator. And so we've used that term denominator around cohorts so much. And so we've almost programmed our brains when we think of denominator to think about cohorts. But the denominator value when we're talking about denominator window is the denominator portion of the metric, of the reporting metric. So when you think back to maybe the PD that we did about participation rate and how we were talking about the denominator for academic achievement, that is also a denominator. It's not an include in denominator field in Empower School, but it's a part of the metric. And so it's kind of all of those eligible members of that group who were supposed to be taking that assessment or in that metric, and they make up the denominator, and then their outcomes make up the numerator. And then through that calculation, we get a metric. So I do apologize for not overly clarifying that piece in the beginning. I know it's so easy for our brains to think denominator means cohort, and in certain metrics, denominator does mean cohort, right? When we're thinking about CCR, grad rate, and high school students on track. But in other metrics, denominator is about who was supposed to take that assessment or who's supposed to be a part of that survey group or whatever it may be. So whenever you take a look at the accountability manual, you'll definitely see those calculation pieces, and whatever is listed in the bottom of that fraction, that's the denominator when we're talking about denominator for a corrections window. So thank y'all for that excellent question and for giving us the opportunity to clarify that and to bring some more understanding around that piece. We're working on getting questions answered. I know we have several of them in the chat, so we'll keep, or in the Q&A, we'll keep working through your questions. But as we do that, we're going to move into planning time. The planning time that we've done in each of our sessions gives us a time to answer your questions, but you also some time to think about who you need to communicate with and how. I know sometimes some of you all jump off when we go into planning, so we also wanted to go ahead and put the session evaluation up here to please scan that QR code and give us feedback. We look at it every single time after the sessions, and we've worked to continue to improve and provide this PD so that we can have the most effective report card year yet. So there's your survey code, and we'll put that back up at the very end as well for you to be able to jump back on with us. Today, we've covered progress towards supporting accurate calculations, that data quality, a timeline for the corrections window and what those 3 windows are going to look like, processes to submit. We didn't get deep into the details, but understanding that there is a systematic way to alert us through a ticket, submit your files, receive feedback, to know that it's been processed or closed, and it's all in a systematic way for every report card, district report card in our state. Consistency there and access to having the best data quality that we can. But now you have to think about, how's this going to look for your team? And for the information, whenever you do get those pieces, maybe who is the designee? We need to brainstorm on that so that we can go ahead and communicate that to the superintendent for when they get that form here today or tomorrow, and they've got a little bit of time to fill it out, but who's going to be that designee? How are we going to attack these windows? Who do we need to have on standby the weeks as we're receiving the documentation and going through and filling in these forms? So that's something for you to be thinking about and planning. And then as you put those pieces together, what are you going to be communicating? Who is the audience for that? How do you need to communicate it? Are you pulling in a meeting? Are you sending an email, making a video? How's your communication going to work? When are you doing that communication? And then that follow-up piece to know that what you've asked for, what you've trained on is actually what's happening and landing back the way that you need it to, so you can have a most successful outcome. So we're going to set the timer for 5 minutes. During that 5 minutes, we're going to continue working on your questions. We will pop right back onto the screen to do just a little bit with next steps, key takeaways, and of course our contact information, and then we will hang back on to finalize answering any questions that we haven't been able to get to. So I'm going to go off mic and off camera here, and we're going to work on some of your questions, and we'll see you back in about, probably at this point, 4.5 minutes. Welcome back from your planning and thinking time. And we are continuing to work through questions, but I do believe we are getting pretty close here to having all of those answered. Final session coming up in June, following our same meeting cadence. We'll have a 1 o'clock on a Wednesday and a 9 a.m. on a Thursday. So we look forward to seeing y'all back here for those details about kind of getting in the weeds, right? Looking at templates, looking at submission, looking at how do you go in to do the SolarWinds, copy paste, all that fun stuff. So for now, you have the windows, you have the ideas around what they're going to be, you have the dates. Next time, getting into those details. So we look forward to seeing you back there. And as always, we will do our very best to record it as well as to post slides for you. Can't make a guarantee on the recording, but it's always our goal. You have key documents here linked on the slide that we will be sending out, but they're also all posted on our PD Resources website. That's been linked in the emails we've been sending you about this professional development series. So check out that website under key resources, and you will be able to find all of these things that are linked on here also linked on there, except for that topic 4 session that we did last month that has been posted to ADT. And the video for that session is linked in there on the second slide, just so it's kind of a one-stop shop. You can get to the slides and you can get to the video all in one place. And those guidelines for those that elements of that PD are also posted there in ADT. Key takeaways. We have been working this year to improve the report card process, cross-functional team here on the SCDE end. You know, every PD we've done has had Wendy involved, Van involved, many other people that we have been bringing in if they were connected to the work. You've heard from a lot of folks to bring and land the most information based on the feedback that we received from you all last year about what needed to improve, putting that work in and bringing you that information, prioritization of improvement projects here. Of course, you know about the professional development sessions, creating manuals or data flow that were related to accountability, getting those posted out to you. And then we've had work groups, putting in work on those critical issues, little pods of work groups that have been diving deeper in even some things that we're checking every single day to see that hopefully issues that we've had in the past are not issues that we have this year. So we are putting in the work that we can to alleviate those as early as possible. And the corrections window is a part of that too, bringing you who's included early as soon as we're able to establish that, then layering in those values and then bringing you the metrics with a goal of having all of that in and done by October 1st so that when we get to release, everything is just exactly as you expect. Of course, anything could come up in there. We know we have standard setting going on. Things happen, but we will keep you in the loop and we will keep you informed, and we will do all that we can to support surfacing information for you along the way. So biggest goal, we have a high impact, high quality report card this year. Remembering that accurate report cards do require accurate data and primary corrections to be happening now. If you see something, dig into it and work on making those corrections. The corrections process is designed to improve transparency and confidence, getting essentially the elements of that student level file that you've always gotten in chunks along the way, so you can know what is landing, how it's landing, and build your confidence in that data as it comes out. District preparation before summer is essential. Y'all know if roles are changing, responsibilities are changing, vacations are coming, whatever they may be, planning for all of those pieces now, so that as the different windows come out, that you know how y'all are attacking that and can do it with efficiency and accuracy through the processes that we're sharing. And as a final note, we are committed to providing you guidance, tools, and support throughout the process, and we look forward to seeing you at our June PD. Do reach out to us if you need us. Van Holden, Era Roberts, Wendy Stevens. Our contact information is here on the screen. It's also been included in those emails that we've sent to you. That school report cards email address is what we use to try to send out our mass communications, but it does not reach us just directly to our inbox. So the best way to get us is those direct emails. And again, our email addresses are here on the screen. I'm going to pop back up that survey piece and we'll go through and see if there's any questions left. And we finished essentially right on time. So thank you all and have a fabulous rest of your weekend. Happy graduation to everyone who's having graduations over the next 2 weeks. And we'll see y'all back in June.